Four sources tell NBC News Republican Congressman George Santos has been indicted on federal charges. This news comes as Santos faces mounting legal issues and is the subject of multiple congressional, federal, and state investigations. NBC News reports in December, two federal law enforcement sources confirmed that federal prosecutors from the Eastern District of New York had opened an investigation into Santos and were examining his finances, including potential irregularities involving financial disclosures and loans he made to his congressional campaign. A source with direct knowledge tells NBC News Santos is expected to appear at the Long Island Federal Courthouse today. Santos and his lawyers did not respond to requests for comment. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. Congressman, you have repeatedly called on George Santos to resign from Congress. Your reaction to the news of these charges?
Well, it is not surprising, but disappointing nonetheless. Obviously, his conduct has been embarrassing and disgraceful. None of us are perfect, but you need to have a little bit of humility in this business. And if this is the best we can do representing us in Congress or at any level of government, I think it speaks volumes to where we are as a country. And so, I think if George had any decency or dignity, he would resign. I've repeatedly called on him to resign since these allegations first surfaced. Because it's a distraction, first and foremost, to all of us in Congress trying to do the work, especially in New York, representing our districts. But more importantly, I just don't see how he can serve. I don't see how he can represent his constituents well and do his job.
Congressman, reports yesterday that the White House meeting between the president and the leaders didn't go well. Some saying that Kevin McCarthy was disrespectful to the president of the United States. Kevin McCarthy, the speaker, later denying that he had called him a liar. And the president's coming to your district today. Obviously, it's a district that supported both Joe Biden and you. Curious, what's your view of the best way forward in resolving this debt ceiling crisis?
Well, Joe, throughout this entire discussion, I've had three parameters. Number one, the president, the speaker, and the Senate Majority Leader must negotiate in good faith. Number two, we must cut spending. Both parties are to blame. There's no question about that. But we cannot continue to spend at the levels we have and incur debt at the levels that we have. We're over $31 trillion in debt and counting. I remember back in 2006 seeing the national debt clock at $9 trillion. So we have added a lot of debt over the last decade and a half, and it's unsustainable. And finally, we cannot default. I think all of us in government have a responsibility and an obligation to work together. These are serious challenges. Everybody has their political stance. But at the end of the day, the president and the speaker and the Senate Majority Leader have an obligation and a responsibility to sit down. Speaker McCarthy requested on multiple occasions to meet with the president and the Senate Majority Leader. They met back in February. It took 97 days for a second meeting to occur. And now, the day after that meeting, the president is coming to my district. I welcome him, obviously, coming here to the Hudson Valley, and so I will be there today because I'm willing to listen to what he has to say. But we have to engage in a good faith negotiation, and I think just taking the tact that we're not going to negotiate is wrong and frankly, hypocritical. I mean, the president has had numerous positions when it comes to the debt ceiling. As a senator, he voted against raising the debt ceiling when George Bush was president. As vice president, he negotiated on behalf of the Obama administration to enact spending reforms as part of lifting the debt ceiling. And now he's taking the position that there should be no negotiations whatsoever, clean debt ceiling. And the reality is Chuck Schumer can't pass a clean debt ceiling out of the Senate. The only people who have acted so far are House Republicans. Now, the president and the Senate Majority Leader may not like the plan that we passed, but they can't pass their own plan. So we have to sit down and negotiate in good faith, and that's why I'm going today. And I'm going to talk to the president when I have the opportunity and just encourage him to be the Joe Biden of old and cut a deal.
Well, Congressman, they are going to meet again on Friday. So in 48 hours or so from now, there will be another conversation, even though not much is said to have come out of that meeting yesterday. I'm curious because you represent sort of an important point of view here in the Congress, which is you were a Republican elected a couple of years ago by a narrow margin in a district that Joe Biden won. And so you can't afford to sort of be a bomb thrower one way or the other. You've got to manage your district. So what are the concerns of the people who live in your district? When you go down and you'll go out and talk to your constituents today, what are they focused on? What are they actually talking about versus what you might hear on Twitter or maybe even on TV?
Well, Willie, it may feel like a couple of years, but it was only a few months ago.
It was. Forgive me. Forgive me.
You know,
yes.
I guess that's the nature of our politics today. But look, my constituents first and foremost are concerned about the cost of living. Inflation obviously continuing to run rampant high. Energy prices skyrocketing. People are struggling. And I live in an area that has among the highest property taxes in America, which is why my first bill that I introduced was to lift the cap on salt. But people want us to work together to address the challenges. Yes, people are concerned about the prospect of default or us not paying our previous debts incurred, but they also believe that we need to rein in spending. Nobody in my area thinks that adding $5 trillion in new spending in 2 years is sustainable. And so, the cost of living is the biggest focus. And I'll tell you right now, the migrant crisis. With Title 42 ending later this week, New York City has taken in over 60,000 migrants. They're now looking to ship some of these migrants up to Rockland County and other parts of the Hudson Valley. People are very concerned, very frustrated with the policies that have been enacted at the border. And the lack of a bipartisan immigration solution. My wife is an immigrant. I've been through this process. She became a citizen 2.5 years ago. It is a broken system, and all of us have an obligation to fix it. It has not been fixed in nearly 40 years since Ronald Reagan was president, and this is unsustainable. And so with Title 42 ending and more migrants flooding the border, this is only going to get worse if we don't act. And that's what people are concerned about right now. Republican
Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, who will be with the president on that visit to the Hudson Valley today. And yes, who was elected 6 months ago, not a couple of years ago. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.